Good evening, and we continue with where we left off yesterday with the northern plains of India. This is part 5. We'll also do the Peninsula Plateau as well as the rivers. Okay, so here is where we have the Upper Ganga. We stopped with the main divisions of the Ganga. There are 3 divisions: the Upper Ganga, Middle Ganga, and the Lower Ganga. So the questions I would have liked to hear from you is how is it divided? Because it is not state-wise. So Upper Ganga starts from around the Delhi ridge and goes up to the covers western part of Uttar Pradesh, and then from western part of Uttar Pradesh to the eastern part of eastern part of Uttar Pradesh to the western part of Bihar is where you have Middle Ganga, and then from Bihar to West Bengal is the Lower Ganga. So what is it that actually divides this plain? So it is the type of soil that is found in this region. Now we all know a common term for the soil as being just alluvial soil. But alluvial soil is made up of 3 parts. It is made up of sand, silt, and clay. And it has been seen that as the river leaves the mountains, like I showed you yesterday, the bigger particles are dropped first, that is very large particles. And then those are called as boulders, anything between 2 millimeters to about 64 millimeters or even more. Then we have the next lot, which is the gravel. So gravel is around 0.2 to 2 millimeters, like that. And then you have sand, then you have silt, and then you have clay. So that is the type of soil that is dropped makes a distinct character of the plain in terms of what can grow there. For example, rice can grow anywhere as long as you have clayey soil and you have a lot of water. But where you have wheat and other crops growing, you need a more of a sandy soil. So wheat requires sandy soil. Even sugarcane requires some amount of sandy soil, so that the water doesn't remain stagnant. At the same time, there should be plenty of water available, right? So up to the western part of Uttar Pradesh, we have sandy soil, more of sandy soil, right? I will be doing soils briefly so that you know those terms also, because those terms are important. We call them as loams. So it's more of sandy up to western Uttar Pradesh, that's the Upper Ganga. Middle Ganga is more of silt, and Lower Ganga is more of clay. So the common crop in the Middle Ganga is rice. And then the most grown crop is rice. And then Lower Ganga has other crops such as jute. Jute is a very important crop grown here, including lots of rice. Different varieties of rice are grown in the Bengal region. And in the drier parts, obviously it is the growing of wheat, right? So let's look at Ganga Yamuna. So the Ganga, it begins from the Ganga Yamuna Dome, Upper Ganga, Rohilkhand and Agra in western Uttar Pradesh. These are the areas that come under Upper Ganga. The height here is just about 300 meters, 100 to 300 meters. And it is drained by the right bank tributaries of the river Yamuna, right? Where you have Chambal, Sindh, Betwa, and Ken. So all this comes in the Upper Ganga region. These rivers begin in the plateau region, but when they come down into the plains to join the Yamuna, then that is where that flat area is called as the Upper Ganga Plain. Upper parts of this region are, upper parts of the region are also drained by other rivers such as the Sharda, okay, which is more important here. And this is, of course, the most productive region in India. So you have near the tributaries, you have the growing of rice. Away from the tributaries, you have the growing of wheat. And since you have green revolution, a lot of these what you call areas are focusing only on growing rice. Okay, so that's with reference to the growing of wheat, and that's with reference to the upper Ganga. Then the middle Ganga here is central and eastern Uttar Pradesh, going up to Bihar to a place called Muzaffarpur and Patna. And that is the western Bihar region. Okay. So here is where the slope becomes even less, right? It's absolutely flat. The region is absolutely flat, which is why this region has several floods. Okay. You have frequent floods, you have change in the course of the rivers once the floods are over. And nothing much has been done about trying to prevent this from happening, because the place is highly densely populated. So you can't remove towns and cities, right? And therefore, and of course, so many villages in this place. And people don't really live in very large villages. They're just spread out. So as far as possible, land is devoted only to the growing of crops. And rice is the most important crop here in this region. Okay. So what are the important rivers that come into this region? On the left bank, that is coming from the Himalayas, are the Gomati, Ghagra, and the Gandak. These are the three main rivers flowing into the river Ganga. Okay. And then from the south, we have the Son River, right? That is the right bank tributary coming from the plateau region. Now we must remember that each of these rivers bring in a separate kind of soil sometimes, especially the Son River, because it is coming from the plateau region, which is more of igneous rock. And the other Gomati, Ghagra, and Gandak, which is in the north, coming from Himalayas, which is sedimentary rock. So the type of soil coming into this region, in the northern type, on the northern part of the Ganga plain or the right bank, will be different from that of the south bank. But since plenty of water is available and it is all fine soil, therefore you will find that here rice is the predominant crop. So that's your picture for Lower Ganga Basin. Now, Lower Ganga Basin, unlike the others, starts from the southern part of Bihar and inclusive of other parts of Bihar, that's the eastern part, and goes right up to north of Bengal. So the North Bengal region, which is the foothills of the green part that you see, and you see the small little projection of the land, that is Sikkim. Okay, so from there you will find there are some more rivers that join up here, and here it is extremely flat, it is extremely fine soil, and the whole of Bengal, except for the Darjeeling district of Bengal, the rest of it is all clayey soil, right? And therefore jute is the most important crop here, right? So the location here is from Patna in the west to the foothills of the Darjeeling Himalayas, and then it turns down in the north, and it turns down south towards the Sundarban region. Okay, so that's the extent of the Lower Ganga Plain. Then in this region, you will find that you have the rivers Kosi and Teesta. So the three Gs that you have flow into the middle Ganga, that is, there are all the tributaries of the river Ganga. And then you have Kosi and Teesta flowing into this region, right? So you may know that Kosi is known as the river of sorrow, right? Because it keeps on, flooding, and it completely, like, this is a really low-lying region, extremely flat, very fine soil, right? And therefore soil erosion happens very quickly, and therefore this river particularly gives a lot of trouble for eastern Bihar. Now Kosi, unlike the other rivers, has its source beyond the Himalayas. It's a trans-Himalayan region. It comes through the gap between the passes, not the Nathula Pass, but another small break in the mountains there, right? And it crosses that region along, flowing parallel to Teesta almost, and then enters into the northern part of eastern Bihar, right? So that's these are the two rivers. Now, what has happened here, and the reason also why this entire region is part of the plains, is that during plate tectonics, some parts of India were broken away from each other, right? And we have what we call as faulting happening, right, in the region. Now, what is faulting? Faulting is just the slipping of the land. So if it's down faulting, it means that entire land has slipped downwards. So due to the tensions created in the region, obviously the weight of the material and so on and so forth, you will find that this part has been down faulted. We have another faulting that is happening in the Peninsula Plateau region, where we have the Narmada River and Tapi River flowing. Okay, but that's the plateau region. So in this region, this area is sort of, broken down, disappeared or separated from the mainland, which is why the plateau, part of the plateau is like discontinuous, and it appears again in Meghalaya. Okay, so this region is called as the Rar Plain. So the downfaulting here has happened between a group of hills called the Rajmahal Hills and the Meghalaya Plateau. Okay, that entire region has slipped downwards. Okay, that is called as a Rar Plain, and this is where the river Ganga sort of breaks up into two, and you have one part going downwards, right, flowing south, which is the Hooghly River, okay, which also meets up with several other rivers from the plateau region, namely Damodar and Subarnarekha. But the other one called Bhagirathi continues to flow into Bangladesh. Okay, so that's the region that has been broken down. Then the southernmost part of the plain is called as the Sundarban. So we have names of the plains in this region. One is your Rar Plain, which is mainly the main part of Bengal, West Bengal. And the second one is the Sundarban region, which is the Delta region. The Hooghly River further breaks down, right? And it forms a sort of continuous region with Bangladesh. And that's where you have the tidal forest and that Sundari tree, right? And as I told you earlier, that you have Bengal tigers, and you also have crocodiles, right, in this area. Okay, so that's your lower Ganga plain. Then we move on to Brahmaputra Plain. Now the Brahmaputra Plain, as you can see, is extremely long as you go from one end, almost 720 kilometers, right? Starting from the gorge there, Dihang Gorge, and then in the northeast, and then going right up to a place called Dhubri in the west. Dhubri is a famous place because that's where you have the waterway, the national waterway is built in one of the points is Dhubri there. Okay, and this is the entire region. So you can see it's all green. Now the color that is shown here, the green part is the actual Brahmaputra Plain. The yellow part that you see is the mountainous region, the plateau region. Okay, and of course Meghalaya is also a plateau region. They have not colored it, shaded it, but it's actually part of the plateau region. And if you go north, you can see the foothills of the Himalayas, right? So only in the Assam plain is where we have the Brahmaputra region, right? So the features are 720 kilometers long, and it is 80 kilometers wide from Arunachal Pradesh and the eastern edge to the Meghalaya plateau. That's the width of the region. General altitude is very less, only 130 meters. Remember, the Ganga plain goes up to 272 meters in Saharanpur, whereas here this region is just 130 meters in the east. That is the easternmost, where the Brahmaputra River actually begins to flow into India, and 30 meters in the west. Now, of all the rivers in India, when we say east flowing rivers, then you can also include Ganga, right? And when you are looking at west flowing rivers, we generally think of only the plateau rivers, but no, we need to also remember that Brahmaputra is a west flowing river. The idea, why do we need to know this, is because we need to know which is the higher part and which is the lower part, right? So knowing the direction of the flow of the river is the basic requirement for anything, whether you're building your house or you're building roads, and also you need to know how the river flows, and then construct whatever you have to construct along with that. So that's how you have the Brahmaputra, flowing west, and then it turns south, right? In south of Meghalaya Plateau, it turns south into Bangladesh, right? Now, this region, entire Brahmaputra Valley, is divided into two: Upper Assam Valley and Lower Assam Valley, separated by the 94 degrees east longitude. So what's the difference between this is that the Upper Assam region, the Upper Assam Valley is made up of a whole lot of hills, okay? And the Lower Assam Valley is only the Brahmaputra Valley. Okay, very wide, full of a lot of what you call islands in the river and so on and so forth. Okay, so that's basically your Assam Valley in the region, and it is separated by 94 degrees east. Now, Upper Assam Valley is important because it grows tea. All your famous company like Brook Bond and Tata Tea and all that, they all have their what do you call that? Sorry, their tea estates. Okay. And we also need to remember that tea in different areas tastes different. Okay. And this is the tea that is very popular, not only in India, but in the whole world. Okay. So most people in India prefer the tea that comes from the Assam Valley because the flavor is strong. Okay. And the even the strength of the leaves is like, it's a lot. So you put a little tea leaves and you get very strong tea, whereas Darjeeling tea is not the same, right? So that's what we need to remember with reference to the Brahmaputra Valley. I've already told, we'll talk about Brahmaputra river in detail after we finish off with the plateau region. Okay, the river details we will talk about later. That was only about the plains. So the plains comprising of Rajasthan plain in the west, and then you have the Punjab and Haryana plains, or the river Sutlej and its tributaries. Then you have the Ganga plain made up of three divisions: upper, middle, and lower, and finally the Brahmaputra plain. Now we come to the most complex part of India, which is the peninsular plateau region. So as you can see, it is in the form of an inverted triangle, and it occupies a major part of India. If you see the plain is a narrow strip between the Himalayas and the plateaus. The Himalayas are hardly any Himalayas in India, the northern mountains. Most of it is in Nepal, most of it is beyond, right? So only the Kashmir region, Kashmir and Himachal Pradesh region have more of the Himalayas. And most of the Himalayas are in Nepal, Bhutan. So what little Himalayas that we have is a very, very narrow stretch and very small stretch. So the plateau here is very extensive. And not only is it very extensive, where we probably, if we take the population of the whole plateau region, it will probably be more today than the plains. Though Uttar Pradesh and Bihar have the highest population in our country, you will find that if you combine it with all the other regions of the plateau also has very high number of people living here. Especially the plateau region is famous for, except for Delhi, which is in the Ganga plain, but in the plateau region, we have several cities which have crossed the 10 million mark, right? So the density of population, the amount of what we say as versatility, or to use a simpler word, variety that you have here is huge, right? So when you are thinking of developing anything in this range, in this region, we need to actually focus on what is the characteristics of each of these regions, because each of these regions is different from the other. So we can't say, oh, plateau region, and let's go ahead with development or plans. It has to be looked into it in detail, the geology especially, okay, the slope of the land, right, and other also physical factors that can affect, right, can be affected because or whatever plans we make. Okay, so that's your plateau region. So as you can see, you have many dark lines here, and these are all the mountain ranges. Though I say mountain ranges, they're just like about 900 meters. Some of them are really low, but they're basically comprising of hills and mountains, we can say that. And the rest of region is flat. So a plateau is generally a flat region about 300, starting from 300 meters and can go up to 6,000 meters. For example, Tibetan Plateau is more than 6,000 meters. Pamir Plateau is also roof of the world, more than 6,000 meters, right? But what is it? What is a physical feature here is that once you reach the plateau, it is flat. So you can see flat land right across, interspersed with small little hills with lots and lots of broken down hills here. Man has broken it down as well as nature has broken it down, right? And hill ranges and so on to complicate. So then it becomes very complicated, right? So for example, I'll give you a small example where I was talking about water management. So when I was in college, there was a plan to connect the Ganga with the Kaveri, right? And whoever thought about it did not know what India was made up of. Now, if you think of water, excess water from the Ganga to be brought to the Kaveri in the south, can you imagine what it has to go through? First and foremost, from the plains, it has to go up the plateau region. Then it has to climb the Vindhya range, and then there is again another river. You have the Narmada River, then Satpura Range, and you have Tapi River. Okay, and then you have the plateau here again with several rivers flowing through. So it would not have been what you call a practical thing to do such a thing, unless, of course, you can use a pump or channels, and the construction would have been huge. And then once we have divided our country into states, there will be lot of like political problems, in the sense that this water is mine, that water is mine, you cannot touch this, you cannot touch that. And they can be, even the people stealing the water, right, for their own purposes, right across the region. So it was the most impractical idea to think you would connect the Ganga to the Kaveri. So therefore, they have now created connection of rivers in small areas. So Godavari Krishna connection happened because it was in a small region and the region was flat, right? So that's how you can think about when you can connect water systems, so that your water is equally distributed and the floods are reduced. So we need to look at smaller areas with reference to this. Right. So what are the general features? It is in the shape of an inverted triangle with an area of about 15 lakh square kilometers. And as I said, it has a diverse topography of mountains, hills, plateaus, valleys, okay, right across the region. The average height of the plateau is only 400 meters from mean sea level. So you're taking the highest levels and you're taking the lower level and you're making it equal. The lower region, of which southern part is slightly higher. So you have Anaimudi here with a height of 2,695 meters, the highest peak in the Nilgiri Hills. Okay. And this region is also zigzagging with a whole lot of large rivers that are mainly flowing from west to east, from the Western Ghats. So what does this indicate about the entire plateau, especially south of the Satpura Range or Tapi River? You will find that you need to understand, if the rivers are all flowing towards the east, that means the land is sloping right from west to east. So the plateau, even when in the earlier stages, when it was higher, it was not very flat in terms of being absolutely flat. So though we have many areas that are absolutely flat where water has collected and you have a whole lot of lakes, but if you see the rest of the region, it is all sloping towards the east. And unfortunately, the western states in this region through which these rivers flow, then they think that we have greater control over the region, and they have blocked it by building several dams. Right now, the dams have been built only there because dams cannot be built within the plateau region, can only be built in the Western Ghats because you need specific conditions to build dams. So not the eastern states, therefore, they have no conditions to build dams, though they have tried. Okay, Odisha has one of the largest, what we call as earthen dams, and it took a long time to build and a lot of problems there. But then Odisha has some part of the eastern Ghats, so they were able to do it. But otherwise, you don't find many dams on the east. Most of the dams are located on the west. Therefore, the western states seem to think that because the dams are located in their state, that means they have that water belongs to them, right? So that's the unfortunate situation that we have in India. Okay. Now, this region, as I've already said, already has large deposits of metallic minerals, like mainly manganese and manganese, iron ore, and then you have copper, you have gold, you have mica, right? As well as plenty of waterfalls. The waterfalls have not been utilized the way waterfalls are utilized in Europe for a generation of electricity. Okay, but they are at least attract tourists, and the surrounding region has been maintained, is eco-friendly. Okay, now what's the significance here? I think I've already done this with you earlier. There are several minerals that we actually sell in order to get foreign exchange, as well as the minerals are used for industrial growth in India. So we have several iron and steel industries, and then linked to the iron and steel industries, we have other manufacturing industries, and we have heavy machinery and so many other things linked to the refining of those minerals, right? So the country has become industrial, and Nehru was the one who decided that as soon as we became independent, to set up these industries. Okay, so that because he thought if you had more industries, we would then become more developed quickly, right? And in a way, it did help. We did have, we were able to construct the rest of the country with the material that was made by the iron and steel industries, right? Then we also have large deposits of coal for the iron and steel industry. Okay, the coal here for the iron and steel industry is mainly as a reducing agent to remove the impurities from iron and manganese, because the iron and manganese are what is put in a blast furnace. And some of the coal, most of the coal is also used to generate electricity, what we call as thermal power station, right? So wherever water is available, that water is heated using coal by burning coal, and then that generates your thermal power. Okay, that is called thermal power. 65% of India actually depends on thermal power, and that 65% is all living in the eastern side of India. On the west, we have more of nuclear power, wind power, okay, but thermal power is mainly important for 65% of, like if you take the eastern, if you divide India into half, right? So starting from just south or just east of the Western Ghats, that entire region is dependent on coal for their electricity. Whereas that is 600 kilometers, say, from the nearest dam. Beyond that, electricity cannot be produced. Hydroelectricity cannot be produced. So we have hydroelectricity, nuclear power, and now we also have wind power in the western half. But the eastern half is dependent mainly on the burning of coal and thermal power stations. Then this entire region has different kinds of soils, right? And depending on the water from the rivers or from the rain, you'll find agricultural activities actually more predominant than industrial activity, because you have a whole lot of farmers here, right, who are actually working with very small lands. Some of them have become smart farmers, and we need to have more of those smart farmers, right? And the entire plateau region has a wide variety of agricultural activity. Then it's an important, many places are famous tourist places. You have temples, waterfalls, forest rivers, reserves. You also have hill stations here. Okay, so tourist places for temples, you have Tirupati is one of them, which is famous, which earns a lot of money, right? Waterfalls, I already mentioned. You have the Jog Falls, which is one of the highest ones in India, okay, with plenty of water. So attracting tourists basically. And nowadays you have a lot of trekking happening, walks happening in the region, and that generates income for the area in which is developed for all these activities, right? So that's the significance that we have here. The Ganga plain is most important only for agriculture, right? There are not many industries in that region. Northern mountains, again, it's only tourism, mostly tourism, and a little bit, say, maybe of wool that comes in, or you have skiing activity and adventure sports and so on. And people try and develop other activities. Like I said, Uttarakhand has a lichens park. Where do you on earth do you have a lichens park? You don't. But they have used their like their available resources, and they've created a lichens park, and that's what I would like to go and visit. Definitely go and see it, because lichens are something very beautiful to look at, and to be able to create an area where you have all kinds of lichens growing, it's simply not even heard of, right? So that's your significance of this region. Now, the divisions here are extremely complex, and several divisions, right? But broadly, you can divide it into two, right? What are the two divisions? The two divisions as being separated by the Vindhya and Satpura ranges. So you have one Central Highlands, which is to the north of Vindhya, and the second division is the Deccan, which is to the south of the Vindhya and Satpura range. So these are the two broad divisions, right? And we can call them as two macro areas, because they are not small. They are very, very large, right? Now, each of these divisions are also, so the part lying to the north consisting of Malwa, Chotanagpur Plateau, right? And these highlands, that Central Highlands, that known as Central Highlands. So Malwa Plateau, Chotanagpur Plateau, which is right across the north from west to east. If I go back to the map, you can probably understand. So starting from the Aravalli range actually, and going right up to the Meghalaya hills, right? And that the major portion is Malwa Plateau and Chotanagpur Plateau. These consist of what we call as the major divisions of the Central Highlands, whereas to the south is the Deccan. Now, the Deccan is also further subdivided, because North Deccan is completely covered by lava and black soil, and South Deccan is completely covered by red soil. Okay, so that's why the divisions become. So the subdivisions here, each subdivision has at least 3 to 4 other divisions. So if we take the North Central Highlands, this consists of the Central Highlands is the entire region. Then the North Central Highlands consists of Aravalli Hills and Malwa Plateau. Now, where are these located? These are located in Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Okay. Then you have the South Central Highlands consisting of the Vindhya and Satpura ranges. So though Vindhya and Satpura ranges divides the two regions, these ranges belong to South Central Highlands. Okay. Then if you go to the east, you have the Chotanagpur Plateau. Okay. And then further, after crossing the Rar Plain, right, or also called as the Malda Gap, Malda, the Malda Gap, right? That's where also have a Malda Express that goes to Kolkata, and that is in that region. So you have the Meghalaya Plateau, and in the northeast, yeah, in the northeast. What happened there? Yeah. So here is where I have the Deccan Plateau in the south. I have the Vindhya and Satpuras there. That's the Central Highlands. So starting from Aravalli range and the Malwa region, that's known as North Central Highland. Then south of it is Vindhyas and Satpura. East part is Chotanagpur Plateau. And as you cross the Rar Plain, you have the Garo, Khasi, Jaintia Hills and all this Purvachal region. That is mainly your fourth division. So we have 4 areas here which we can take as the meso divisions of the Central Highlands. If you take this Deccan Plateau, the entire thing is called Deccan Plateau, but we actually call it the North Deccan and the South Deccan. And then each of these Deccan Plateau is also further subdivided, right? Because we have the Western Ghats, we have the Eastern Ghats, we have the coastal plain. The coastal plain is part of the Deccan Plateau region because it is a continuous region. But then we study coastal plain separately because it is a place where the activities are different, the soil is different, and it is almost continuously similar things right across, right? And we have already done the coastal plains, right? So let's look at the Deccan Plateau. North Deccan Plateau, also called as Maharashtra Plateau. South Deccan Plateau is mostly Karnataka, Telangana, and Tamil Nadu uplands, right? Then we have the Western Ghats. So Western Ghats considered as a separate entity because the characteristic feature of Western Ghats is different. And 7 is Eastern Ghats. Now we also have not a part of the Deccan Plateau, but an 8th division, which is Kutch and Kathiawar region of Gujarat, which are actually belonging to North Deccan because the lava flows continue in that region. Plus, you will find that that region doesn't seem to be connected to the Central Highlands, right? Because Central Highlands is all Malwa Plateau and Chotanagpur Plateau. It's a lowland. Kutch and Kathiawar region is a lowland, and they can be taken as a separate zone completely. Okay, so that's your divisions here, major divisions of the plateau region. Okay, so again, just to give you an idea, back again to that previous one so that you don't get confused. The Central Highlands have 4 divisions, right? North Central Highlands made up of Aravalli range and Malwa. Malwa Plateau is just at the foothills of the Aravalli range. South Central Highlands, Vindhya and Satpuras. Then you have a separation by the Son River. That's the river Son. Okay, and that is the Chotanagpur Plateau. And then there's another separation. You have the Rar Plain or the Malda Gap, and you have the Meghalaya and the Eastern Plateau region there, right? Then Deccan Plateau is generally made up of North Deccan and South Deccan. These are 2 divisions, bordered by the Western Ghats and Eastern Ghats, again studied separately, and a continuation maybe into the southern part of Gujarat, which is the Kutch and the Kathiawar region. North Gujarat comes in the plains, in the Rajasthan plains, and nothing much is happening there. Actually, North Gujarat is a low-lying region where during the high tide, it gets completely covered by water. It's known as a Ran of Kutch, right? Though the Ran is sort of disappearing now, the water is disappearing because every time there's an earthquake, the land is pushed up from the sea. So the Ran is actually disappearing, right? It has, you can say, the white sands of the Ran. There is the Ran festival and so on and so forth. So that's why that region is of not so much of a economic importance, except in the end of the year when people will go there for the various festivals, Camel Festival, or just going there for camping and so on. During the summer, you can't go there, but it's affected by tide. So high tide, it gets covered with water. Low tide, it comes back, and it's a breeding ground for migrant birds. So it's an untouched area, basically, right? So North Gujarat, not much important as an area because it is still under the sea for all practical purposes. Okay, so those are the 2 divisions, and each one having about 4 divisions each, right? That comes down to 8 divisions in the entire peninsular plateau. Okay, so this is what the Aravalli hills look like. They are low-lying hills. They are actually old fold mountains, right? So you can see the parallel ranges there. You can see, if you zoom in close, you can actually see the sedimentary rock. And they are the old fold mountain created in probably in the before the previous ice age, and over time the height of the mountain has actually come down. Okay, and that is Guru Shikhar which is the highest point in that region. It's pretty, they have a temple there at the top, and you can see this is the portion of the Malwa Plateau, which is quite well developed agriculturally. On the western side, it is a desert. Okay. So the Malwa Plateau, source of many rivers. Most important is the Mahi River to the west. Then you have Chambal, which drains the central part. Okay. And then you have Betwa, Darshan, and Ken rivers that drains the east. So the Malwa Plateau located at the base of the Aravalli Hills. And it has so many rivers, of which you will find, so this is what the Malwa Plateau looks like, right? It is at a height. What you can see there are the Aravalli ranges, right? And this is the Chambal River. Now this Chambal River is actually has a lot of water only during these are all seasonal rivers. During the rainy season, it has a lot of water. But otherwise, you will find that the region, the Chambal region actually is a famous region for all the dacoits. So wherever there is water, people are happy. As you can see, you don't have any villages and all in this region because the terrain is extremely difficult in this region. This is the terrain of the Chambal Valley. So what has happened here in the past, this was actually covered with, because the rainfall here is 50 centimeters and you had lots of forested areas here. Unfortunately, the trees were all cut down indiscriminately by the early settlers and then they moved out of the region. And when it rains here, it rains quite heavily. So a lot of soil erosion has happened. So we have soil erosion that is called as gully erosion. So gully erosion means that the soil will be carried away in narrow channels that can go down pretty deep. And as the gullies become deeper in between hills are created, the entire region becomes completely useless for anything. So by the time developed man has come into the scene, this particular region is economically like a wasteland, right? So who can actually survive here? So we have only people who are smart by saying that we can hide here because this region is like a maze. Okay, you know what a maze is, where it's like there is no, you can get lost here. You won't be, once you get into the region, you won't be able to get out unless you have been living there since your childhood. So we just have a community of people who live there and whose only economic activity was dacoity. Why? Because the land you cannot grow, there's no soil, right? There's no transport, there's nothing you can do with this region, right? And therefore you'll find that you have the famous Chambal Valley dacoit, what is her name? I'm sorry, forgetting names, right? That bandit queen, right? And that bandit queen, what do? They just go to nearby villages and they steal whatever they can. They take away all their food supplies. They don't do any killing. They just take away a whole lot of the grains and all and vegetables and all, and then they'll come back and feed their families. So policemen are not able to catch them. The only reason being that the police are not from this area. The police are from other parts of Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh, and therefore they don't know the area. And these dacoits, they disappear very fast, right? The only way they were able to catch them is for them to surrender. So many of them have surrendered, right? Then we move on to South Deccan. So South Deccan is actually, South Central Highlands, made up of the Vindhya and Satpura ranges. Now, if you notice the shape of these mountains, you can see that they have a steep 90-degree drop, right? So this Vindhya range has been created mainly because of down faulting. Just as you had down faulting of the region in between the Meghalaya Plateau and Chotanagpur Plateau, we've had a down faulting here. So what were the conditions here? For example, when India was being formed, or rather when India was moving, a whole lot of lava has come over the Maharashtra region. So when lava flows, the height of the region, which was maybe 300 meters, just reached up to 1,200, 1,600 meters. And we have like lava flows right across, right? Layers and layers of lava. And this lava is as much as a 2 or 3 story building, that thick. Okay. So obviously, the central part of India, the weight of the central part of India increased of that plateau region. And so when plate tectonics was happening and India was trying to move, right, the land cracked up. And it cracked up in 2 places. One in which the river Narmada flows is called as the Narmada Valley, and 2 which is the Satpura region. So the land here on this here is actually straight downwards, right? And the river Narmada flows through this region. Same way with just like you have the Satpuras. I have the picture for Satpuras also. So this region now is called as the Vindhyachal or Bundlekhand Plateau. The main rivers are Sindh, Betwa, Ken. They all begin here and then go down further, right? Tons, Pahuj, Dasan, and Chambal. Okay, they all have their source in the Vindhyachal, in the Vindhya mountains. Okay, and most of them, because they have their water only in the rainy season, the 100 centimeters of rainfall and what you call the deforested areas have created what you call a deep gorges here, and the land has broken up and you have rapids, cataracts, and waterfalls. What is a rapid? Rapid is a step-like waterfall. So the water seems to be rushing down. Waterfall, if you see a waterfall, you don't think it is, oh, it is going down at great speed. But if it's going over the land, then you can see it rushing down, and that's why it's called rapids. Cataracts are just smaller rapids, right? And you have other waterfalls in this region. So important places here are Jhansi, Sagar, Panna, Banda, and Chhatarpur. Jhansi, as you know, is famous for Rani Ki Jhansi is from the historical region. Panna is famous for diamonds. You have all the diamond mines in the Panna region. But most of these regions are now occupied by Adivasis because development was difficult in this region. And so you find that they are just small towns and they carry out very small activities. Then you have Khajuraho here and the Ajanta and Ellora caves. Okay, so these are the early man who came here and did not know where to live because they were not building houses. They found that they had a whole lot of caves here. This is near Ajanta and Ellora. I'm sorry, my memory is going, it will come back. So these are in central Maharashtra, okay? And here Aurangabad. Aurangabad is the name of the region. And so people live there in the caves and they have carved and painted a whole lot of things inside those caves. So this is an important tourist spot, okay? So that's the region, which is your southern part of this thing. Right, now why I'm showing you this map is because people of Bundelkhand now want to become a separate state. Some part of Bundelkhand is in Uttar Pradesh, some part of it is, most of it is in Madhya Pradesh. And the people here want a separate state. Okay. And whether that's good or bad, because the language they speak is just a dialect of the original Hindi. And what one does not realize is that when you divide a country into so many places, the resource base decreases. If India had been left as one single country and we just had administrative zones, north, south, east, west, the mountainous could have been separate. Of course, northeastern state could have been one zone as a separate region. Then probably development in terms of many aspects would have been much quicker. By dividing India into states, that was the biggest mistake the first government made. We had just complicated things. So we all have a whole lot of brakes. You know what I mean? What brake am I talking about? The car brake, vehicle brake. Like we can't move forward with anything, right? Because there are several issues, especially along the border, especially I told you with rivers crossing through several territories. So your resource base decreases. And if you're, and India also has the strange, this thing, we have it in the United States also, where if you're taking petrol, say from Tamil Nadu, and it's going into Karnataka, immediately the price rises. That's because we have customs duty, excise duty. Similarly, we have firecrackers. Firecrackers in Tamil Nadu are much cheaper than they are in Karnataka and the rest of the country. So anything that crosses the border comes with a greater price. And it is our country, it is our resources. And what have we done to it? We've just sort of divided it, and that's why we are not moving forward at the pace that we should have been moving forward. A good example I can give you is the continent of Africa. Now, all the countries of Africa, there are 66 countries. They all have separated out, become smaller and smaller and smaller, and the resource base has decreased. Then they have to buy things from the neighbors, and they are not friendly with the neighbors, so they will not get it cheap. And that is how the improvement does not happen. So if we have regions, like we could just have had, even in South India, we could just have had coastal states, region, plateau region, like that, small regions administratively, and not brought what we call as those other cultural differences. We should have, they could have remained, no doubt. If you are from Karnataka, you can celebrate Karnataka festivals, or if you're from Uttar Pradesh or Gujarat, or doesn't matter. You celebrate whatever you want, but we need not have had an administrative boundary which is really creating havoc, right? Because everything gets delayed, projects get delayed, and there are a lot of infighting, there's a lot of waste of resources, and so on and so forth. Anyway, that Bundelkhand region, and we have one more in Maharashtra called Vidarbha, which is fighting for a separate state. What they don't realize it, the moment they become a separate state, they will become a poor state. And it is only people in power who will be rich and take full advantage of everything. They are not going to face any problems. Okay, right. So this is the Bundelkhand, Bagelkhand region, also called as Vindhya Pradesh. They've already created a state for themselves with a map and so on and so forth. Satpura regions. So these are the ranges from where you actually have the tributaries of Mahanadi, Tapi, and Godavari, right? Many tributaries originate from the Satpura range. And you have the Tapi River, which is also a rift valley. It's called as a, I didn't know, I don't think I mentioned the word rift valley. Rift valley is that faulted region, the region that has slipped in between two areas, so that the higher regions have become ranges. Okay, so here is probably the greenest part of our country, and it is famous for the various tourist destinations, because you have all the famous tiger reserves in this region, biosphere reserves, tiger reserves. So Satpura Tiger Reserve and other wildlife sanctuaries is the main attraction in this region. The region, like I said, is highly complex, and so not suitable for growing any crops, because there are not much of flatlands available here. And it gets fair amount of rainfall, so the greenery remains. But this region also has a whole lot of Adivasis. And Adivasis live in a sustainable manner. They don't destroy the so you can see again the steep slopes. Okay, of course, a lot of it has changed, and what we call, because of erosion and weathering, a lot has changed, but this is how it looks basically, the Satpuras. Then we move to the east central highland, and that is Chotanagpur Plateau. Now, this is the most important region in our country, because it is rich in so many minerals. You name it, you find it there. Okay, so you have mica, bauxite, copper, limestone, iron ore, coal, and because it has so many, especially because it has limestone, iron ore, and coal, All the iron and steel industries are located here because these are the three basic minerals that are required for iron and making iron and steel, purifying iron and steel, right? Included here is also manganese. Plus, you also have the rivers. Damodar originates here, and you have several waterfalls, okay? And you have very important coal fields here. So the Damodar River, it has eroded its valley in such a way that it has exposed the coal fields in great depth. So the coal fields here are not near the surface. They are deep underground. Okay. And these are the important names of the coal fields that we will do later. Jharia, Raniganj, West and East Bokaro, Ramgarh, North and South Karanpura. All this extending from Jharkhand, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, then you have West Bengal, okay, right up to West Bengal. Raniganj is in West Bengal. That entire area where you have the plateau belt. It's a plateau belt, like you also have the Subarnarekha River flowing there, right? And along the Subarnarekha River are many of the iron and steel industries set up by the government of India, right? So that's the Chotanagpur Plateau. And here is where you have some pictures. You have these waterfalls, okay? And this is the Palama waterfall in Madhya Pradesh. This is a dam that you have on River Damodar. So River Damodar is also called as the sorrow of Bengal because it used to keep flooding. Now that they built the dam in the Eastern Ghat region, they built a dam, and that's how they're able to control the flow of water. But it has plenty of water because this is a region of more than 100 centimeters of rainfall. Okay. Next is Meghalaya Plateau. So the Meghalaya Plateau also made up of the Mikir Hills, okay, consisting of Garo, Khasia, and Jaintia. As I said, these have been detached from the Peninsula Plateau by the Malda Gap. Today it is called as a Rar Plain. This is the wettest place on earth, having heaviest rainfall. And it also is rich in minerals, coal, limestone, uranium, and sillimanite. But not much of this is mined because the region is thickly forested, okay, because it's such high rainfall. And the rainfall is so high that people can't even go outdoors. It's so heavy. So therefore, having a mine, and I think in Meghalaya, they do have these mines, and it was drowned out. The whole thing collapsed and a lot of people lost their lives. This is from 2 years ago, I think, right? When you had a lot of people who died working in these not illegal mines. They have a whole lot of illegal mines. Okay. So coal, limestone, uranium, and sillimanite. Uranium can be mined, but we don't mine uranium there because it is, like I said, it is a radioactive mineral, and it's not accessible. It needs to be accessible. So this is a very what you call uneven region, and you have the river valleys are wide, deep, right, and very difficult to go from one place to another place. Transport, communication is difficult. Okay. And that's your waterfall. So this is in the off season. In the rainy season, the entire region will be covered by the waterfall. Okay. So that's your Meghalaya Plateau, the top of the Meghalaya Plateau. And you can see it's hardly been disturbed. The original forest is still there. This is the tropical rainforest because they get such a lot of rainfall here. Okay. Then we come to Deccan Plateau. So Deccan Plateau, south of the Satpura Range. It extends over 8 Indian states, right? What are the Indian states? Maharashtra, then you have Odisha, you have Maharashtra, Odisha, then you come down, you have Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, then Goa, and Karnataka, and then Tamil Nadu and Kerala. Okay, so 8 Indian states. Western Ghats forms the western boundary, Eastern Ghats is the eastern boundary. Satpura and Vindhya range is a northern one. So the entire Deccan Plateau is surrounded by mountains, and in the south you have the what do you call, the Nilgiris range in the south, where the tip of the both Eastern Ghats meets Western Ghats. You have the Cardamom Hills and the Nilgiri Hills. So this is made up of mainly volcanic rocks, especially the northern part. 67 to 65 million years ago, you had a whole lot of lava outflow here, right? So volcanic rocks in the south, north, and you have igneous rocks in the, this is what it looks like. So if you look closely, you can actually see black lines separating the other material. So that is the Deccan Plateau, what we call as the Deccan Trap region. This region is called as a Deccan Trap region. Okay, and you can see that the plateau was down here, and then it sort of risen up, and over the years, layers and layers of lava has flowed out. So it looks like a design, nice design created there. If you've seen the movie Chennai Express, okay, when I watch movies, I only look at the background. So Chennai Express was not taken in anywhere in Tamil Nadu. It was taken in Maharashtra. So the point at which Shah Rukh Khan gets off the train, you can actually see the Deccan Trap region at the back. So if you know your geography, you can identify a lot of these places, right, in this region. This is a closer look. So you can see the layer here. So what has happened here is that the lava has flowed. Initially, these are lavas that flow through cracks in the ground, known as fissures or fissure eruption. And then there's been a break. Then the other soil has been deposited like that. And then alternatively, again, lava has flowed, and gradually the entire region has been lifted up. Okay. So let's look at North. That was North Deccan. So North Deccan is consisting on the east, Mahanadi Basin, which is a rich agricultural land. The Chhattisgarh Plain, where you have the Korba coal field, Dali, Rajahara, iron ore mines for Bihar steel plant. Okay. And then you also have Garjat Hills, which is located in interior Odisha, which is pretty famous for the waterfalls as well as tourism purpose. Then you have the Dandakarnya Plateau, which is very rich in iron ore, right? So these notes will be given to you, so you just need to keep reading it and learn it, right? So that's the North Deccan Plateau, the three divisions, okay? And this is the richest iron ore deposit region in this area. Then South Deccan consists of many plateaus. So first, and a group of hills. So the group of hills, Anamalai, Cardamom, is found in the south, drained by the Kaveri and the Tungabhadra. North Deccan is drained by Mahanadi, Krishna, and Godavari. Tungabhadra is the tributary of the, it's a very large tributary of the river Krishna. Okay. Hyderabad is the most important cultural commercial city of now, not of Andhra Pradesh, of Telangana, right, is located here. Okay. Then you have the Western Ghats. Now I'm just going quickly because this is just information for you. You will get questions on that part only if it has been in the news. So if it has been predominantly in the news, you may get some questions, right? So that's the South Deccan region that you have here. Here is where you also have the location of the IT city, which is Bangalore, okay? And many other important places in small towns, especially in Maharashtra, which have become the food industry, agro and food industry areas, especially in Maharashtra, where there are all kinds of fruits growing here. And you have a whole lot of agro-based activity in this region. I'll do that as a separate topic. Okay, so that's the South Deccan. Western Ghats, known as the Sahyadri Mountains, north of Palghat Pass. So there are two passes, one in the north, one in the south. In the south, it is known as the Nilgiris in Tamil Nadu. Okay, and this is one of the world's 10 hottest biodiversity hotspots. So what do you mean by a hotspot? A hotspot means that it has the world's attention. Okay, the world is keeping an eye on this. Some activities are happening here and they are trying to maintain the diversity. Biodiversity means having a large variety of living things. So in the world's hottest 10, one of the 10 biodiversity spots, Andaman and Nicobar Island is one of them, right? This is the Western Ghats is also a part of it. Then it has, so that's the biodiversity, so many species of flowering plants, mammals. And in the news, you will keep on saying one new frog has been formed, one new butterfly has been formed, like that, found, and so on and so forth. So a lot of, scientific research is actually continuing in this region to find out, and the number of species are actually increasing, right? And that is what it looks like. So it's like a number of parallel ranges actually. Many of these ranges are parallel to each other, broken down because of heavy rainfall in this area. Okay. Then you have Eastern Ghats. So Western Ghats is important only for, actually economically, it's not important, right? But it is, the country is trying to maintain the forest cover in this region and improve the amount of forest cover in India. So as of such, doesn't have many hill stations right across. They have just a few, like you have Mahabaleshwar, which is in between Pune and Mumbai. Then you have Kodaikanal and Ooty, which are down south. Okay. And Coorg is in the lower slopes facing Karnataka is where you have the coffee plantations and so on. Then you have Wayanad, which is a tea estate in the mountain range. But otherwise, it's an untouched region, right? And it has been broken down from here and there only for the construction of railway lines, for the construction of roads, and so on and so forth. But the original forest cover has come back because of the Save the Western Ghat project. Okay, right. Eastern Ghats. This continues. So this is continuous range. Western Ghats, there are just two gaps. One is the Palghat gap, and then you have Bhor Ghat and Thar Ghat in the north, right? But that we will do later. So this is made up of discontinuous hills, which are residual in nature. So what has happened here is that this region would have had hilly areas right across, but because of the rivers have broken through the hilly areas, and therefore they have been separated out as small hilly areas, ranges, and that's why it's called as the Eastern Ghats, right? So most of them are broken because of these three. Where we have Godavari. So the Western Ghats run. Who is Manoj Kumar? One of you have, please put yourself on mute. Thank you. Either you're not paying attention to this class, I think. Anyway, so we have these rivers right from north to south, West Bengal, starting from West Bengal, Odisha, Andhra Pradesh, and then Tamil Nadu in the south, right? The Eastern Ghats goes right across this region. There are actually a lot of names, but I'm not going to give you all the names of the region, right? And we'll move on to the third. So Western Ghats, again, not very important. They are mainly important as tourist places where you have temples, famous temples here, okay? And small tourist spots, which are not very cold, but for a change, you could go to all these places, right? And that's how it is. Kutch and Kathiawar region, this is the extension of the plateau in the west. So the Kutch region is basically has a whole lot of small fold and thrust tectonics. So you have small fold mountains there, you have depressions there, right across, because the movement is still happening. The continent, or rather the Gondwana region, is still moving, and in moving, we have several earthquakes that keep happening in this region. In 2001, we had a major earthquake here, and many of the villages were flattened out. Okay. Now, this region north of Kutch is the Rann of Kutch. The water has receded a bit. It's no longer that clear. I mean, this thing, and these are the flamingo birds that come in during your during the summer season. Sorry, winter season, right? They migrate from Siberia. Okay. This region, Kutch region, is also becoming important because you have the Kandla port there, which was created when India lost Karachi. So when Karachi was lost to Pakistan, another port was required, and therefore the Kandla port was created, and now it has been renamed as Deen Dayal Sagar Port. Okay, and this region is been hit by tsunamis and earthquakes in the last 10 years, 5 to 10 years, and therefore has nobody lives there anymore. They all live in the interior, right? Kathiawar region, which is the Saurashtra area, you have a low range of hills called the Gir Hills. And here is where you have the highest point called Girnar, which is an active, extinct volcano. So that is why it is a part of the plateau region. The area derives its name from a Kathi community, right? And you have the Gir National Park here. So Gir National Park has been in the news because the environmental committees are wanting some of the lions to be moved from the Gir National Park into other reserves and national parks. The reason being that in case something happens, we cannot lose the lions in one shot. So in order to continue protecting them, it has been suggested that some of the lions from here should be taken and rehabilitated in other, like in the tiger reserves. Okay, and maybe some tigers should be brought in here, but unfortunately Gujarat is not willing to accept it. That's been in the news in the past, and it could come up. Okay, right, so that's your highest point, Girnar, and you can see there's a temple on top. This has been in the news where I think you have a rope way that takes you right up to the top. So you don't have to climb the steps. Otherwise, there are steps that you have to climb to reach the top, and you can go up through a rope way now. That's been in the news. So these are the divisions of Peninsular Plateau region. Okay, Malwa, Bundelkhand, Bagelkhand, Chotanagpur. Right, the Malwa includes Aravalli Hills. Bundelkhand and Bagelkhand is the Vindhyas Satpura region and Chotanagpur Plateau, right? Then you have the northeast extension should have been here. Deccan Trap, you have the whole Deccan Trap, north, south, Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, and the northwest extension. That's an error there. I've not been able to find another division. Okay, so I know this is a bit of a tedious thing, just going through all the details, right? So I'm just, I know, and we are doing 2 hours together, so it may be a little tedious, but then we have to cover as much as possible, right? Because questions can come from anywhere here. The notes have more details and will probably be given to you. So we look at rivers, general information. So rivers of India, we're just going to do a brief description about that. We have what we call as rivers starting in the mountains, going through the plains, and then reaching the delta stage. Now, not every river has this characteristic formation, right? So in India, it is only the river Indus and its tributaries, and the river Ganga and its tributaries, and partly the Brahmaputra, that has all these 3 stages. The peninsular rivers, they begin in the Western Ghats, and the east flowing rivers, they don't have that much of a plain stage. they have a plateau stage, okay, and then they have a delta stage. So the plain stage is very, very small. It's more of going through the plateau. So when they go through the plateau, here is where you may not have any floods because the rivers have cut deep valleys in the plateau, right? So the plateau stage is where you have a whole lot of waterfalls and it's not a straight flowing river. But then you can pump out the water and use it for agriculture in the surrounding region, right? So, but generally when we look at the stages of a river, we normally use the words mountain stage. This is a well-developed river, plain stage and delta stage. Looking at it closely, we need to understand that the water that comes into the river comes in two ways. One is directly from when it rains, it flows off the surface, right? But some of the water also goes underground and joins the river in that area. So we need to actually do a proper geological survey to find out where the river, any river is getting most of its water from. So when it's heavy rain, then it is not only the overflow from the ground, from the top of the ground, it is also the underground water that is overflowing, right? And that can add to the floods. So that area is called as the catchment area. So the catchment area consists of both water flowing from the top, from the surface, as well as water flowing underground. Okay. And as you can see, initially you just have small streams, right? And then they join up together to form a bigger river. And these streams are called as tributaries. And you may have tributaries joining up anywhere. Okay. Then you have the river begins to meander in the plain stage because it's very flat. We saw it yesterday. And then when it reaches the sea, it forms the delta. So this is just general information about the river. So again, here you can see a better picture of how the river is formed and all the minor features that you will find in the region. So the lake, for example, we have Mansarovar Lake as one of the lakes from where you have the flowing of both the Indus and the Brahmaputra River, the Sangpo, and also Sutlej River. Okay, it's a huge lake. And many of the rivers form from glaciers. Ganga, Yamuna, Ghagra, Gangotri, Agra, Gomati, all of them start from glaciers. Okay, and then some of the rivers start from underground, like the Kaveri. The Kaveri doesn't start from the top of a mountain. It starts from underground, right? And a spring that is called as the Tale Kaveri in Cool, right? So the source of the river it can varies from place to place, right? And from depending on many factors, mainly the climate, the geology, the physiography of the place, right? And these are all the things you are likely to see along a river. These are all the terms. You have a rills, you have brook, stream. So rills are basically small, thin valleys in which you may or may not have water. Okay, the rills may become gullies, and the gullies become ravines. Ravines are what we saw in the Chotanagpur Plateau. Okay, and then the first river is a brook, small, then it becomes a stream, and then it becomes a river. So that's how we have it. And then we have various features in each level. In stage A, in the mountains, you'll have specific features. Go down to the plains, you have specific features. I've talked about meander, floodplain, oxbow lake, levee. Okay. And finally, you have the delta. You can see the estuary there where the river is directly meeting the sea. There is no delta. There is no distributed. The river just flows straight into the sea at that point, right? So this is the general, picture of. Okay, so look at the map of India, then you can distinctly see wherever we have the highlands, and we talked about all these highlands, those are the sources of the rivers. But Indian rivers can be broadly classified into two. those north of the Vindhya range, right? That is in the plateau region. Let us take the whole plateau region. Those of the entire plateau region, they are fully dependent only on rainfall. So they are called as seasonal rivers. Whereas in the northern plains, River Ganga, River Indus, and Brahmaputra, they depend on the melting of snow. So here is where you will find they are perennial rivers because they have water throughout the year. Okay, so that is the important thing that we need to look at when we want to develop rivers, right? Kaveri is probably the only river that actually has water continuously because it is coming from a spring, and the water takes a long time to seep in and comes out and then continues to come out. But all the other rivers, they generally would dry up, which is why we have built dams in order to distribute the water evenly, so that you collect the water in the rainy season and you can use it for the rest of the year, right? For the rest of the country, and not have a problem. So the dams have been created mainly for that. And because dams have been created, electricity also can be generated, right? So if you look at all the rivers all have a tree pattern. Look at Ganga, it has a branch, it looks like a branch tree, right? So we have this, what we call as dendritic. These are terms that are generally used. Dendritic is like tree-like. The tributary rivers will meet the main river as an acute angle. Okay. So all rivers in India, 99% of the rivers in India have a dendritic pattern. Then we have called what is a rectangular pattern. A rectangular is when the land is absolutely uniform and you have cracks created, and then the river flows in those cracks. They meet each other at right angles. Okay. And they create, that is what is called as a rectangular pattern. Then similar to rectangle, we have something called as a trellis pattern. So trellis is quite similar to rectangle, except that the trellis has highlands in between. So if you have highlands in between, then the rivers that are coming from the highlands, and then you have lowlands in between, the rivers that are flowing there, then they meet each other at right angles. Forms are like a net pattern, right? You see like a pattern of a net, and that is called as your trellis. So where do we have trellis pattern? In India, we have trellis pattern mainly in the northeastern state, where you have so many mountain ranges, right? And in between the rivers that are flowing, the water will go from the mountain hills, ranges into that, right? And form a kind of a net pattern. Then finally, we have the radial pattern. So radial pattern in India again is found in the Chotanagpur Plateau. For that you require a mountain or a hill, and rivers should flow on all sides. So that is a very rare thing in India, because in India our main source of river is mainly the Western Ghats, the Himalayas, and all these ranges which are long ranges and not circular. But we have one, Narmada, Damodar, Subarnarekha, Son, they all emerge from what is known as the Amarkantak Plateau, which gives the drainage pattern as radial. Okay, so let's move on to details. So this is, this is again, similarly, you have drainage inwards and outwards. Right bank and left bank, I have already told you. You have to see in which direction a river is flowing from highland to lowland. Any river, so then face that direction, right? So as you're facing that direction, the rivers or tributaries on your left will be called as the left bank tributaries, and the tributaries on the right. So Ganga is flowing in that direction. So Ghagara, Gandak, Kosi, Tista, Sharada, they are all left bank tributaries. The right bank is Yamuna, And it's, of course, the tributaries of the Yamuna are also right bank. Then you have the river Son. Okay. And if you take Hooghly River again it's right bank, Subarnarekha and Damodar rivers that flow in this region. Okay. Change the direction, such as you change it to the opposite side like Brahmaputra or Tapi, and the entire thing changes, right? The left bank becomes the right bank and the right bank becomes the left bank. One sorry for the break, right? So that's your left bank and right bank. So these are now the major rivers of India. In the extreme north, we have the Indus and its tributaries, so the Indus and Sutlej and tributaries. Then as you come down, you have the Ganga and the Yamuna, right, flowing towards the east. Then you have Brahmaputra, right? And then in the plateau region, we have Chambal, we have Luni River, we have the Narmada, Tapi, right? Then we have Mahanadi, Godavari, Krishna, all these are the rivers that we have here. So we actually need to look at the watershed. From where do all these rivers flow? So all these major rivers are flowing from three main watersheds. What is a watershed? A watershed is a highland from where rivers have their source, the river where the rivers begin to flow. Okay. So the first one is the Himalayas and the Karakoram range. The second is the Vindhyas Satpura Ranges and the Chotanagpur Plateau. The third is Sayadri and the Western Ghats, which is in the Western India. Okay. And therefore, these are the three watershed regions. So these three will decide whether the river has water throughout the year or whether it is like, seasonal, right? So 2 and 3 are seasonal. Okay. And the Himalayan rivers, Karakoram ranges rivers, they have water throughout the year and they are perennial. So you can actually classify the Indian drainage system. One, on the basis of how the water reaches the sea or where is the river flowing. So on that basis, we have Arabian Sea drainage and we have the Bay of Bengal drainage. So what is the Arabian Sea drainage? Is that all the rivers flowing towards the Arabian Sea. So if you see the map here, you have the Indus that is flowing towards the Arabian Sea. That is the only perennial river flowing into the Arabian Sea. Okay, right across the entire Arabian Sea, Indus River, also known as the Sindhu, is the only river that is flowing into the Arabian Sea throughout the year. All the other rivers are seasonal rivers. From the African region, if you see those rivers also, most of them all are seasonal, right? Because they get their water only during the rainfall. So this is how the line in between divides the whole thing. So if you can see, most of the river water is all flowing into the Bay of Bengal, which then proves the fact that the Bay of Bengal is sweeter than the Arabian Sea. Now, there are a number of short rivers flowing from the Western Ghats, but none of them are that important. They are not in terms of the size, in terms of the amount of water, the length, and so on. They are very short rivers. And they flow almost continuously, yes, into the rivers, but they are very, very small in terms of volume. Okay. So if you can see the Bay of Bengal receives all the water right across India, okay, flowing into the region, which is why Bay of Bengal, the water is actually sweet. So we have a water divide. This line here is the water divide, right? So you need to just remember the major names of major rivers, right, which belong to the Arabian Sea division and the Bay of Bengal. Okay, right. So these are separate. Start from what we call as the Delhi Ridge. Then you have the Aravallis. Then you have the Western Ghats or the Sahyadris, right? And 77% of the drainage is oriented towards Bay of Bengal, and 23% is oriented towards the Arabian Sea, right? So these are the important rivers: Indus, Narmada, Tapi, Mahi. Mahi is in Maharashtra. Periyar, which is in Kerala, right? There's a bigger rivers that flow into the Arabian Sea. Then, of course, that one is, I think you will be familiar with Arabian's Bay of Bengal now. The second, classification is based on the size of the watershed. So, what is the size of the watershed? For example, the basin of how much water is being held, right, or drained by the river, their entire drainage. So we have something called as a drainage basin, starting from the watershed to the mouth, inclusive of all the tributaries flowing into the river, right, which is called as a catchment area, right? So we have 14 such drainage basins having an area of more than 20,000 square kilometers. Ganga, of course, is the biggest, followed by Brahmaputra, Krishna, Tapi, Narmada, and we have many more. These are just a few examples. Then we have medium river basins with a catchment area of 2,000 to 20,000. These are smaller rivers like Kalinidi, Meghna, Periyar. Okay. And finally, we have minor river basins. So when you're actually developing water systems, we need to see actually the size of the river basin and how much of rainfall is received, where does the water come from, where is it flowing, on what kind of topography is it flowing, and so on and so forth. So places having a very low, less water, they are called as the minor basin. So here you can see the major and the minor. Okay, so from the size you can make out how small some are and how very large. So Ganga is the largest. It comes right up to the Vindhya range because its tributaries are starting from the Vindhya mountains. Its tributaries are also starting from the Aravalli range. So it includes the Aravalli range, the Malwa Plateau, the Bundlekhand and Bundlekhand Plateau, right? And the Vindhya mountains. So that entire thing belongs to Ganga. And then it goes right down there. So it narrows down towards the east. Okay. That's where you have the Rajmahal Hills. And the Rajmahal Hills divide the basin between Ganga and the Damodar and the other rivers there. Okay. Then the Godavari is the second largest. As you can see, in terms of area, Godavari is the second largest. Then comes Krishna, right? Then is Mahanadi, and then Kaveri and the others. So others are all small. Pennar, Palar, they are all medium. Okay. Then the entire Sahyadri coast, west coast, has just been created as one drainage. And that again is a medium one. Very small ones are the others. Wherever you have others, that's where you have the smallest drainage basin, right? So this is just to give you an idea that when you look at a river, you don't look at just what is flowing in the plains. You have to go back to where each tributary starts. Each tributary of each of the rivers, tributary of the tributary, you need to include all that, because if you touch any one, you could be affecting the other. So when you are planning river basins and you're going to set up dams or any other water management schemes, you have to look at the entire basin. How much water is coming, from where is it coming, and when is it coming, right? And then only plan the entire system, right? Next is on the base of mode of origin. So mode of origin here is 4 types. One is Himalayan rivers. 2 is the peninsular rivers. Okay. 3 is coastal rivers. and 4 is inland drainage basin. So Himalayan rivers means that we know that because we are, it's coming from the Himalayas, you will also have melting glacier and therefore they'll be perennial rivers. Peninsular rivers are all coming from the peninsula. You will also know what kind of soil they will bring, okay, and whether they will bring soil or not, because peninsular rivers rarely flood. The floods that are created are mainly man-made when dams are suddenly opened, right? Without warning, dams are open and that's when you have floods. But otherwise, peninsular rivers do not flood. Coastal rivers are all those east coast, west coast rivers mainly, right? Because east coast, the rivers are coming from the peninsular region. There are very few east coast rivers. Okay, like I think, yeah, they're all coming from the plateau region. So there are no rivers starting. So the west coastal rivers are more important for the west coast. Inland drainage basin now. Now these are rivers that disappear in the land and don't reach the sea. And those are only found in northwest India in the Thar Desert. So the rivers start from the Aravalli range and begin to flow and then disappear. So we have Luni River, for example. It is a river that has the sweetest amount of water, but it then goes and disappears, you know, somewhere into the sand. Then we have another river called Shekhawati, Vishdavati. These rivers just go into the desert and disappear, right? So that is called as an inland drainage basin. The Rann of Kutch is one outlet or inlet for all these in some of these rivers. Okay. So very quickly, we'll just go through the various rivers, right? And I'm going to look at the rivers as a whole, not that one that is belonging to India, belonging to Pakistan and so on. So we begin with the Indus system. Bokhar Chu is a glacier in the Kailash range, which is trans-Himalayan, beyond the Askai Chin range and even north of the lake, okay, that you have there. Then it is called as Singhi Khambam, meaning lion's mouth in Tibet, okay, and it forms a spectacular gorge near Giljit in Jammu and Kashmir. I'll show you the gorge. The tributaries are Zaskar, which is below Leh, Suru and Dras, Shaikok Nubra, Shigar, and that's the listen. So what you need to know here is that where it is starting, right? It is starting in Tibet, and then it comes into India. Now this is Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and then in what is known as this particular gorge, that's the gorge. So on either side are actually the Himalayan mountain ranges, okay, and the river has, you know, cut through at such great speed and created what is a gorge. So all the gorges in the world, this is what it looks like. Yeah, and that's the Indus River. So we've already done details about it. They used to ask questions in terms of as you go from this direction to that direction, but they are not there. But it's just good to know the important tributaries. And like I said, if it has come in the news, then look up the information. Okay, I don't want to go into too much detail here. So it enters Pakistan near Chilar, which is the Dardistan region in North Pakistan and North Kashmir. Finally, it emerges out of the hills near a place called Attock, where it receives the Kabul River on its right. That is the Kabul River coming from Suleiman Range, right? And then, like I told you, it then meets up the Panjanad. Panjanad here is the Sutlej and the 5 rivers. Okay, a little above a place called Mithankot. So Panjanad is a name maybe you should know. Right, so I told you this yesterday, the name of the river given after all these rivers meet, the Sutlej, then they form together, then that short stretch is called as a Panjana, meaning 5 rivers. Right, so these are the important dams that you have on the Sutlej River in India. of which Bakra Dam is most important and Nangal Dam. There are about 13 to 14 dams here. These are the highest gravity dams in the world. Gravity dams are dams that are built at an angle. They're not built straight across the river, so that there is less sort of pressure and stress on the region. And the river water flows through along with all the sediments and so on. So they are less likely to break off, right? So that's the Bhakra Dam here. Okay, so previously they used to have, right? I still have, so any doubts here? I think the Ganga one is a separate one. So this, I'll just quickly show you. The entire thing is not here. The Ganga plain is separate here. The river Ganga and its system is not is a separate Ganga, and but we have done the Ganga actually briefly. Okay, so that's your Ganga system. So what you need to know here is just the names of the rivers. So you can see the rivers here. You have Sharda, you have Ghagra, Gandak, Gomati, Sharda, Ghagra, Gandak, Koshi, also known as Saptakoshi, right? That meet the Ganga on its right bank, left bank, right? Then you have Yamuna and its tributaries, and you have the Son. So this is just a repetition, which we have already seen. So it starts in the Gangotri Glacier in the Uttarakhand region. And the name is given as Gaumukh because the cave appears like the face of a cow. Initially, it is called as the Bhagirathi, and it meets at Devprayag, it meets the Alakananda, and after this only it is known as the Ganga. So the Bhagirathi is the same river that divides itself. So when it divides itself also, it's called as a Bhagirathi, right, in Bengal. And when it meets here, meets Alakananda, then it is called as the Ganga. Alakananda has its source in the Satopan Glacier, which is above Badrinath, and it consists of Dauli and Vishnu Ganga, which meet at Joshimath or Vishnu Prayag. So this is the Panch Prayag, right, which are important holy places where you have the meeting of various rivers, right? So Yamunotri is there, which is in the Yamunotri Glacier, Gangotri in the Gangotri Glacier, and you have Kedarnath, Badrinath. These are all starting points of various rivers. Then whether you have the Dauli Ganga meeting with the Alaknanda, that is Vishnu Prayag, okay, where the Nandakini meets them, it's known as Nand Prayag. So the various prayags. So this map is like, sometimes they'll give you the map, mark there 1, 2, 3, 4, and you need to know the various prayags. So the various prayags here are Vishnu, Nand, Karna, Rudra, and Deva Prayag. Okay, before it finally goes into the plains through Haridwar, right? So I'll just skip this here. So the Ganga enters the plains at Haridwar, the Harika Dwar. So it is the place at which the Ganga comes out. Okay, so first it flows south, and then up to Mirzapur, and then it turns and flows east in Bihar. So the whole thing flows south, southeast, and then east right across, right? But the general direction is east. There it splits up into two distributaries. I told you that, Bhagirathi and Hooghly. And the total river has a length of 2,525 kilometers. Then it is shared by the following states. So Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, West Bengal. So you can imagine West Bengal, of course, has the end of it. So the sharing actually could be a problem with with reference to Uttarakhand, if they build dams across the region, then it would be a problem. So dams have been built in this region, right? But if they build dams further, you could have problems in this region. So that's how you have the Ganga moving from Gomukh, right? To then it is called the Gangotri. Then you have the various Prayags, and these are the important places. Varanasi is an important place. Allahabad is where it meets the Yamuna. Okay, the two meet in Allahabad, and then from there they flow as one river to Varanasi, Patna, and then you have Kolkata. So these are some of the important places along the river Ganga. Delhi is located on the river Yamuna. So Delhi, Agra, all they're all located on the Yamuna. The Yamuna flows parallel to the Ganga till it reaches Allahabad. Okay, tributaries of the Ganga. So you have Yamuna, Son. Okay, I've already done this. Then you have Ram Ganga and Gomati and the places where it meets, Ghagara, okay, and Gandak. So these are the important tributaries of the on the both the right bank and the left bank. Okay. Then Kosi, of course, from Mount Everest in Tibet, and Mahananda from the Darjeeling Hills. Then you have tributaries of the Yamuna. I've already told you this, Chambal, Sindh, Betwa, Ken. You just need to remember the order. I don't think you need to remember more of the details. But though I've given you the details, it may be a little difficult to remember so many details. But you have to just keep on reading and keep on memorizing and keep on looking at that. So this is the Yamuna, where you have starting at Yamunotri Glacier. Then you have a small religious place called the Paunta Sahib. Then you have Delhi, Mathura, Agra, and finally it reaches Allahabad. Right? So if you're traveling on a train, you'll be actually traveling to the south of the Yamuna to go to Allahabad. You won't see the Ganga at all until you reach Allahabad. So that's the Ganga river system. And I think I'll stop here. So a bit of a lengthy class in terms of details, right? I don't think you have many doubts. Do you have many doubts? You won't have any doubts. I'll try and make it shorter so that you don't have to look at. So what are we going to do next? Briefly, we will do Brahmaputra River. Briefly, that's an important river, that's why. Very briefly. And then we'll go on to doing the next topic, which is physical geography. Okay, where we'll do a bit of plate tectonics. And yeah, so that will take, so there we'll do the structure of the earth and so on and so forth. Any questions? No questions?
Ma'am.
Yes.
So, like in one of the diagrams which you had shown, right, regarding the like the deltas and the estuaries.
Yes.
So basically, can we say that estuaries are like all the west flowing rivers, like which meet the Arabian Sea? They do not form deltas; they all form estuaries.
Exactly. Yes, including Tapi and Narmada. So what happens here is that when the rivers are short, they don't have time to slow down. If you see River Ganga and Indus, they are extremely long. Then they have a very rapid path through the mountains, so they pick up lots and lots of things. And then when they enter into the plain, they start to slow down, dropping all the material, and they still flow. So finally, when they are reaching the sea, their speed is almost zero. And then the sea is made up of salt water. So immediately they drop the minimum or whatever they've been carrying, especially the very, very fine material like clay and mud is dropped there, and they block their own channel. When they block their own channel, that's how they start to distribute themselves. And over the years, several times they will break up like this and form the delta. But if you see the river Narmada, it starts in the Amarkantak Plateau, and then it is flowing in a flat zone. It is not flowing through a mountainous region at all. So it's not going to pick up anything. And it is a seasonal river. So if it has water also, it just flows at the same speed. And then it finally reaches the Arabian Sea at the same speed. It doesn't slow down. If it slows down, it can drop some material. But then if it's not going to be fast, at any point of time, it is not going to pick up any material. Right? So river picks up material only when it is flowing at a rapid pace. So I can show you a few of those pictures tomorrow. I can include to show river erosion. What do you mean by it and how it is picking up material? It can pick up boulders and it breaks it down into smaller and smaller and smaller pieces. So that is the boulders and all are what cause the erosion. So that is why a longer the river, more chances of it of creating a delta. So Indus River also, Mississippi River is really very long, starting almost Central Africa and then going up to north into the Mediterranean Sea. So it picks up a lot of material from the mountains. There are small mountain, volcanic mountains there. And it's an overflow of a lake that is pretty high. And so it picks up a lot of material. It also comes from the Ethiopian region. The Blue Nile also comes from a mountainous region. So and same way with the river, that's River Nile. Then you have Mississippi. Very long path from the Rocky Mountains to the Gulf of Mexico. So the longer the river is, and it should flow through three mountains, plateau, plain. It should have that three stages. Then only it forms a delta. But most European rivers, they rarely form deltas. Like especially in Britain, they're all estuaries. They flow directly into the sea without forming deltas. Okay.
Ma'am, so what is estuary? Like it is like the absence of delta is called estuary.
The mouth of the river where the river meets the sea directly without forming a delta. And that is why during high tide, the sea comes in. And during low tide, the sea recedes. So it is a region where the river meets the sea directly without forming a delta. That's the correct definition of estuary.
Okay, so estuary doesn't have an identity. It's the absence of delta at the mouth.
Yes, yes.
And ma'am, you said that Bay of Bengal is sweeter than the Arabian Sea. Like, I mean,
because you have so many rivers flowing into it, so many large rivers flowing into it. The quantity of water, if you see, only from India alone, starting from Kaveri, then you have Krishna, Godavari, Mahanadi, Ganga, Brahmaputra. Then if you go on, you have the Myanmar rivers, you have the Thailand rivers. And then you have a heavy rainfall zone in the Andaman Nicobar Islands. So therefore, this region is like completely like the water is sweeter. In fact, people who eat fish, okay, they will rarely eat fish from, that is if they are from used to eating fish from the Arabian Sea, the same fish that is caught in the Bay of Bengal, they will not like it. They'll find something problem with the taste. So the reason is that there's a mackerel fish called bangada. The bangada from Arabian Sea is saltier than bangada from the Bay of Bengal. So that's how they will not like the taste. They are very sensitive to that.
Is there any other significance? Like how does that come to benefit Bay of Bengal in terms of like it being sweeter apart from that fish?
No, there is no significance. There is only significance in terms of the weather. I think I told you how you have what is known as the break in the monsoon. So here is where if anything has less salt in it, it will cool faster and heat up faster. Correct? So Arabian Sea takes a long time to heat up and takes a long time to cool. So what happens is that when it rains and the temperatures are low, the sun's rays have not reached the water surface, Bay of Bengal cools down very fast. Arabian Sea takes a long time to cool down. So when Bay of Bengal cools down, a high pressure is created and therefore the monsoon stops, because the monsoon is just a wind that is blowing from high pressure to low pressure. And so the monsoon stops and the sky clears. And the sky clears, then temperatures increase. When the temperatures increase, the Bay of Bengal will heat up faster, form the low pressure, and continue to pull in the monsoon. So that's the role. There has been a research done by a person who's now retired from the meteorological department. And he has taken temperature readings of Arabian Sea and found that this is one of the main reasons we have breaks. Otherwise, there's no other reason why suddenly the monsoon comes for a week and then stops and then starts again. So we need to have a scientific reason for it. And the scientific reason is what's happening in the atmosphere. Because the atmosphere is heated from below, so even the land when it is covered with clouds and rain, the temperature can drop. And when the temperature drops, high pressure is created. And the West Bengal, Bay of Bengal actually favors all these things. So that's how we have the break in the monsoon. Otherwise, there's no other importance between Arabian Sea. So most of the cyclones form in the Bay of Bengal because it has this what you call sensitivity is more in the Bay of Bengal, whereas temperatures are always high in the Arabian Sea, and therefore the cyclones will not. You need a low temperature, high temperature, low pressure. You need a low pressure to be created, and temperatures here the Bay of Bengal becomes hotter faster than Arabian Sea. It has to reach a temperature of about 27 degrees to form the cyclone. Whereas here, in this case, in the Arabian Sea, it's always high, it's uniformly high. And so you don't have many cyclones formed in the Arabian Sea.
Okay.
Yeah. So shall we start? Yes.
Yeah, like one completely like different point. So like when we talk about the pressure temperature stuff what we discussed, right? So I think the general statement was like the pressure decreases like along with height, right?
Yes.
So like at the same height or like level, the pressure of cold air will be less than pressure of warm air.
No, the pressure of cold air will always be more at ground level. Pressure of cold air will be more than hot air because of gravity.
Okay, no, what about a certain height? Like,
so if you're at a height like say on the
Protopause.
Everest, if you're on Mount Everest, so their air pressure will anyway be low because there is less air there. Okay. Most of the air will be near the ground within 3,000 meters. Within 3 kilometers is where we have the maximum amount of about 80% of the air is within 3,000 meters. So at higher altitudes, the air pressure will be less, but during the cold, it will increase a little bit because cold air generally tends to be more dense and heavier and settles down. So it will settle down at any height and create a higher pressure than normal. We can't say that the air pressure, we can't compare it otherwise. We only have to say that depending on the temperature, air pressure will increase or decrease in a particular place based on the altitude as well as, based on the altitude. So at sea level, if I have high cold air, then there will be a higher air pressure. But if I have warm air, then I'll have a low pressure. But at higher levels, there is less air. So the pressure difference will not be that much. Though cold air will settle down, the surface area will be less unless you're looking at Tibetan Plateau or of those wide areas, Patagonian Plateau and all those high areas. There, the cold air will settle down, but it is less of air the air itself is less, isn't it? Because it is at that height, 6,000 meters, 5,000 meters, the amount of air is less. How do I know it's less? If I go there, I will have a breathing problem. Because why will I have a breathing problem? Because there is less oxygen. And there is less oxygen because there is less air. Though we say 21% of the air is consisting of oxygen, the amount of air itself is less. In that, the 21% then becomes less than 21%. And that is why as I go higher, I require an oxygen cylinder. If I go higher gradually, I may not require the oxygen cylinder. But if I'm climbing up, that's why aeroplanes and all are air pressure, because at higher levels, there is no supply of oxygen. Amount of oxygen decreases with height.
Okay. And ma'am, like which has higher pressure, moist air or dry air?
Neither. It would depend on the temperature of the air. So if it is hot and dry, then it will have a lower air pressure. If it is cold and dry, it will have a high pressure.
I mean, same conditions, like
Yes.
the temperature is warmer than the dry air or the like
Yeah,
the
so
moist air.
that's what I'm saying. The dry, if I say wet and dry, I also need to add the words cold and hot. So hot and dry air will have a lower pressure. It also depends on, if I'm talking about, say, general conditions. So if the air has come down as hot and dry, then I'll have a higher pressure. So it also depends on how that air mass or the vertical air on the vertical air movement. So if I'm just going to compare hot and dry air, normally hot and dry air, because of the heat, the air should actually rise up and it will create a low pressure. But if it is sinking air, like it is over the subtropical high pressure, sinking air, which is hot and dry, creates a high pressure. Cold and dry air is always have a higher pressure. That's why it comes down. Hot and dry air will tend to rise up, but then if it's continuously coming down, there is no place for it to go up. But if it is cold and dry air will always stay on the ground and create a higher pressure. Cold and dry air cannot lift up. That is why when you have hot and dry air meeting with cold and dry air, the hot air will be pushed up very easily. That's the trigger factor. But the cold air will not budge. It will just stay on the ground.
Okay. Ma'am, it is like more about hot and dry and hot and
yes,
moist.
Hot and dry, cold and dry. So then hot and dry or hot and wet, even if it's hot and wet. So the temperature is important. So if temperatures are high, the air will rise. If temperatures are low, the air will sink. So even if it is hot and moist, the air will still rise. If it is cold, cold air will not have much moisture in the first place. It will not carry much moisture. It will be completely in the form of water droplets. Cold air will have more of water droplets because condensation will take place. Condensation takes place, maximum it can take place at 0 degrees. So if the cold air is less than 0 degrees, then you will have water droplets.
So ma'am, that low pressure is like the air is rising. So it
yes.
creates a low pressure zone at the ground, right? That is because
yes, that
it
is why the
escaped
low
from
pressure
there.
is created. Yes. If
Yes,
air rises, whether it is dry or whether it is moist, if air rises, it will create a low pressure on the ground.
Okay,
and the reverse,
so
when the air settles down, whether it is dry or whether it is moist, it is going to create a high pressure.
okay. So this is not related to air in general. It's related to whether it's escaping or coming down.
Yes, whether it is rising or settling. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Okay.